Hello everyone, this video is going to be a bit more of an in-depth look into the current state of Polymino. I'm going to go through all of the menus and show you all the features that are currently implemented, and then I'll do some gameplay and talk about the project more generally as I'm playing. So first of all, just to show that the game is on Steam, although of course the Steam page is already up. I can open up the Steam overlay here, and I can go to the achievements. So you can see the achievements are already implemented. One of the things that still has to be done is making icons for all of the achievements, but as you can see, they are actually integrated into the game. Next up, if we go to play, you can see there's the different game modes. These were all discussed in the Kickstarter campaign. Currently only classic mode is finished, and puzzle mode is partially finished. It was one of the last things I was working on, so it's not really playable yet. And then there's these little help pop-ups if you want to learn more about them. That missing character there is supposed to be a plus, but anyways. And then there's puzzle mode. Now I'll show you the tutorial. The tutorial is something that was really important to get right because this game is so abstract. So the tutorial was something that I continually revised and improved over a long period of time. I'll let you pause and read it if you'd like. The Kickstarter campaign video did have an explanation of how to play, but this is a bit more in depth. And also, if you're not here because of the Kickstarter campaign, I'd recommend checking it out. Link in the description. So anyways, yeah, Polymino is a pretty abstract game, and it's a bit more complicated than something like Tetris, so it was really important to make a tutorial that very clearly explained how to play the game to people. It took a pretty long time to make a good one, but the people that I showed this tutorial to have found it pretty effective. So there we go. Next up, we can check out scores. So currently there's two sort of categories of scores. There's your locally saved high scores, and then there's the Steam leaderboards. Steam leaderboards are another thing I was working on recently, so it's not functional yet. High scores though, we can see there's high scores for each mode. So if we go to classic, you can see there's a bunch of default ones, and then the one at the top is one that I got earlier today when I was testing the game. So these all get saved locally, and they also get saved on the Steam cloud. Next up is options. I'll just quickly go over what options are available. So for video, it's mostly just resolution and video mode. We got full screen, windowed, and borderless, and then you can select a resolution. For full screen, you can also select a refresh rate, as you can see. And then if we go into windowed, this just changes the window size. You can also toggle VSync. This display option changes which monitor the game is shown on. And then you can turn on and off this FPS counter. And then we can just turn that back off. The FPS counter is pretty much always just at the max on my computer, so there isn't much point of having it up. And then for audio, you can toggle music and sound effects. You can also change the volume of each of them. And then last but not least, we have game. Name is at the end of each match you play, if you get a high score, you enter your name in, kind of like in an arcade, but if you don't want to enter it in every time, you can just save one and it'll do it automatically. And then controller layout is something that was really important to me. So you can change, so there's the Xbox layout, PlayStation, and Nintendo. And it was really important to me to have that feature because I use a DualShock 3 controller, and it uses third-party software to make it work on Windows. So Steam games always auto-detect my controller as an Xbox controller, even though it isn't. So for anybody else in a similar situation, I wanted them to be able to override that. Next up, extras. So this is where you'll be able to change to toggle all of that unlockable content that I'm going to be making after the campaign's finished. So block skins, you can change the appearance of junk pieces as well, and projectiles. There aren't a lot of options available yet, obviously. You can change the debris effects from destroying blocks and junk. The border is your heads-up display, essentially, the border around the game board. And then there's only one background available currently. And then to track your progress unlocking this stuff, there's a stats menu, and these unlocks are associated with the Steam achievements. So when the game is released, what'll happen is every Steam achievement will have an unlockable associated with it. Something that's already implemented is that these bars track your progress towards the next achievement. And right now, all of them are either empty or full. The ones that are empty don't have any in-game unlockables associated with them yet, and the ones that are full are because I've unlocked everything. But when you're playing, you'll be able to see those bars fill up as you make progress. And yeah, that's it for the menus. So, except of course, so whenever you start a game, you get taken to this lobby menu, and this is sort of how everybody sets up their controllers before the game. So if I connect another controller here, so everybody has to ready up before player one can start the game. You can also rebind all your controls. So it shows you all the defaults as you're rebinding, because people who I've shown this game to, I mentioned to them that they can rebind their controls, and then they click on it and then they say, actually, I'm not really sure if I have a preference. So it's good to have the defaults. And then if we reassign, so I can press a button on the keyboard, and now when I press a button on my DualShock controller, it goes to player 2, and then my other controller will be player 3. So we'll reassign again, and then I'll use my DualShock controller to play. And we'll go ahead and start with difficulty 7. Higher difficulties in Polymino decrease the amount of time between each chunk piece dropping, so as difficulty increases, you'll have to work faster to clear your board. The difficulty, or speed, can be seen underneath the number of bombs on the heads-up display. Currently it increases by 1 every 10,000 points, and it goes up to a maximum of 20. But one of the ideas that I've been experimenting with has been increasing the difficulty over time instead of every 10,000 points, because one of the design goals for the game is to reward players for chaining long combos and getting lots of points, so I don't want to punish them for doing well by increasing the difficulty. By the way, I found my ability to play this game without losing and also talk coherently about the project to be pretty lacking, so all of this commentary was done in post from here on out. The song that's playing right now is called Cops and Ravers. It's one of the songs that's available on my YouTube channel, but the song actually has a pretty interesting backstory behind it. Originally, for the Genesis version of the game, I created this song using software called VGM Music Maker, which is a piece of tracker software for making Sega Genesis music. And then later, I recreated it on my drum machines and synthesizers to make it a more sort of standalone song and make it higher quality. And that song was actually very different from the one on Sega Genesis because of the different instruments at my disposal, and I ended up changing the structure of the song as well. This version of the song has a much closer structure to the original Genesis version, however it has a very different sound. And all 3 versions are going to be available on the digital soundtrack, so if you're interested in hearing them, check out the Kickstarter project, and the digital soundtrack is one of the rewards you can sign up for. One of the things I'd like to do while this Kickstarter campaign is ongoing is make a behind-the-scenes video demonstrating my process for making music for Polymino. The sound effects you're hearing right now are temporary. You can hear a snare drum whenever I destroy blocks. That was recorded from one of my drum machines, and then the clicking sound when junk gets shattered is also used in the menus. That one I might keep as part of the default sound effects, but as I discussed in the Kickstarter campaign, there's also going to be sound effects packs you can unlock, which will change all the sound effects in the game. One of them is going to be a bit crushed sound effect pack, so it'll all sound very 8-bit and compressed. And then another sound effect pack I'm going to add is going to be one where all of the sound effects are percussion instruments. For For this gameplay footage, I used all of the default extras except for the particle effect when junk gets shattered, which has been switched to the shattered particle effect, it's called. And I chose that because I think it looks really good and it shows off the wide range of particle effects that are possible in Polymino. What's actually happening is it's actually taking the junk block model, dividing it into a bunch of squares, and then each of those become independent particles. One of the reasons why I really want to add Steam Workshop support to Polymino is because the system I've created for adding new particle effects into the game allows a lot of creative freedom, and I would be able to create standalone tools that allow anybody to use my particle effect system to create completely new effects and then add it to the game. A lot of the visual improvements over the Genesis version are a result of not having to deal with the Genesis's limit of 80 sprites on screen at once. Polymino uses a 10x24 grid for the board, so this obviously meant blocks couldn't be sprites on the Genesis, especially for two-player games. Instead, I used a layer called the scrolling playfield, which is typically used for level graphics in a side-scroller type game. It's made up of 8x8 pixel tiles, so this became the size of each block. However, this meant that on the Genesis it was impossible to animate blocks when they got swapped, which is something that does happen in the PC version. Going back to the sprite limit, I couldn't use all 80 sprites for particles. I had to use 2 for the player's cursors and a few more for some heads-up display elements, specifically any text that I wanted to not be aligned on 8x8 tile boundaries. Then the remaining sprites could be used for projectiles and particles. As a result, the number of particles created by destroying blocks and junk had to be extremely limited on the Genesis. On the other hand, any modern PC can easily support hundreds of particles at a time, so I've been able to crank up the destruction and make the game feel a lot more satisfying. Another thing I'd like to discuss is what I have planned for the puzzle mode. The idea is that the game generates a board full of blocks and a few junk pieces, and you have to get as many points as possible with the board you're given because no new junk will drop. I want it to be a fun way to play if you're not in the mood for the pressure of the other modes, and also a good way to practice getting big combos. I have 2 sub-modes planned for the puzzle mode. The first one is the random mode, where each time you play the game will generate a new random board. The second one is the daily puzzle mode. Each day there will be a new random seed used to generate the board, which will be the same for all players, and you can retry the puzzle as many times as you want. This sub-mode will have Steam leaderboard integration, so each day you'll have the chance to compete against the rest of the world for the best score on the current puzzle. The other modes present in the game are still in the early stages of development and are expected to change quite a bit, so I won't go into detail about those for now. So that's pretty much all I had to discuss in this demo. I'll let the gameplay continue until I lose if you want to keep watching it. But thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed and that this was an informative look into the state of Polymino and what it'll be like to play. Don't forget to stay tuned for future updates. My next video will be that behind the scenes look at how I make music for the game. But until then, see you around, and if you decide to stay for the gameplay, I hope you enjoy.